There is a place in the ancient world where architecture performs a miracle that science still cannot fully explain. A phenomenon so precise that it should not exist. And yet it appears every year without fail. The first light of dawn cuts across the Yucatan Peninsula like a blade of gold. Beneath it, the jungle stirs, shifting in slow waves as if waking from a dream older than memory. And in the middle of this vast green ocean, a pyramid rises from the earth with an authority that defies time, its angles sharp, its geometry deliberate, its presence undeniable. El Castillo, the Temple of Kukulkan. For centuries, the purpose of this structure was forgotten. The jungle dragged it into silence. But twice a year during the equinoxes, something happens that science can describe, but not explain. As the sun climbs the sky, shadows begin to move along the northern staircase of the pyramid. Angles sharpen, darkness bends, light fractures, and then, as if called from another world, a serpent of light appears. It slithers down the steps in perfect alignment, its body formed from the interplay of shadow and stone. To many, this looks like ritual theatre, but stay with this story, because the deeper we go, the more you will see that this phenomenon is not illusion, not coincidence, and not myth. The evidence behind it is architectural, astronomical, and quietly unsettling. To the Maya, this was not architecture, it was arrival. In their belief, the feathered serpent descended through this luminous form, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. The sky opened. A being of radiance stepped into the world of humans. Knowledge followed, order followed, civilization followed. Modern archaeology calls it coincidence, a clever trick of astronomy and geometry, a cultural performance disguised as a miracle. But even mainstream researchers admit something uncomfortable. There is no evidence of prototypes, no earlier versions of the pyramid, no signs that the Maya refined the design through trial and error. The structure appears in the archaeological record as a finished masterpiece. How does a civilization with no metal tools calculate the positions of the sun with such precision that a serpent of light appears at the exact same moment every year? How does a society without telescopes track cycles that require a level of astronomical knowledge equal to modern instruments? Science says the Maya learned through observation, but observation alone does not explain the perfection of the equinox descent, and it certainly does not explain why dozens of other Maya structures across the peninsula align with celestial events so rare that predicting them borders on the impossible, unless they inherited knowledge rather than discovered it. The Maya themselves insisted this was true. They said the sky taught them. Their myths describe beings descending in radiant form, wrapped in feathers or fire, bringing mathematics, calendars, and the concept of time as a cycle rather than a line. Archaeology shakes its head at these stories. Myth, not memory. Ritual, not record. But if it is myth, then why does the architecture repeat the same message? Why does the serpent descend with mechanical precision? Why does the pyramid serve as both a calendar and a beacon? What were the Maya building toward? What were they trying to remember? Or worse, what were they trying to warn us about? Because hidden inside the serpent of light is a truth that undermines every mainstream explanation. This phenomenon does not occur by accident. This precision cannot be guessed. This design cannot be improvised. Something taught the Maya to build a cosmic machine. The question is, what or who? The jungle breathes around the pyramid as the last segment of the serpent meets the stone head at the base. For a moment the air seems to tremble. A silence falls, so sudden it feels unnatural. To the ancients, this was the moment the gate of the gods opened, a point where light, shadow, time, and cosmic alignment created a bridge between worlds. A bridge they believed had been crossed before. A bridge they believed would one day open again. This is the story buried beneath centuries of soil. A story of arrival. a story of knowledge, a story of something that came from the sky and shaped human history. And the serpent of light is only the beginning. Across the ancient world of Mesoamerica, long before the Aztec Empire rose or the great Maya cities fell silent, a remarkable story appeared again and again in different regions, languages, and artistic traditions. It described a being who descended from the sky, took physical form, walked among humans, and transformed their civilization. To the Maya, he was known as Kukulkan. To the Aztec, he was Quetzalcoatl. Earlier cultures preserved variations of the same figure, suggesting a narrative far older than any surviving kingdom. This consistency presents a challenge to mainstream anthropology. Myths normally evolve, merge, or diverge as cultures change, especially when separated by centuries. Yet the accounts of the feathered serpent maintain a stable core. In every version, he is a teacher associated with the heavens and is linked to knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, sacred calendars, architecture, and the organization of society. He arrives suddenly, imparts advanced understanding, and eventually departs, promising that his return will coincide with specific celestial events. Mainstream scholarship explains this overlap as cultural diffusion, arguing that the Maya and Aztec inherited elements of earlier traditions. However, such diffusion requires contact or prolonged interaction, and the historical record shows that these cultures developed in very different periods, separated by collapses, migrations, and transitions. The persistence of nearly identical details across discontinuous timelines raises the question of whether these stories represent symbolic archetypes or memories rooted in lived experience. Descriptions of Quetzalcoatl further complicate conventional interpretations. Pre-Hispanic codices and indigenous testimonies portray him with traits uncommon in Mesoamerica, such as an unusually tall stature, a long beard, and a lighter complexion. Some historians attribute this to post-conquest reinterpretation, but these characteristics appear in sources that predate Spanish influence. Such descriptions, though inconsistent with local populations, were accepted by the cultures that preserved them, suggesting that the figure they remembered did not resemble them. Beyond physical appearance, the nature of the knowledge attributed to the feathered serpent challenges the assumption that he was purely mythological. He was credited with introducing mathematical systems, establishing calendar structures that track cycles spanning thousands of years, and teaching methods of astronomical observation used to align temples with rare celestial events. These contributions are not expressions of spiritual myth. They imply systematic, technical instruction. If these were symbolic stories, it is striking that the symbolism revolves not around moral lessons, as most mythologies do, but around scientific concepts that require long-term observation and specialized understanding. Archaeologists often argue that the Maya developed their astronomical knowledge through careful tracking of the sky over generations. Yet there is little physical evidence of the long transitional periods needed for such development. Their mathematical and calendrical systems appear abruptly in the archaeological record, already refined and already tied to cosmic cycles such as the synodic motion of Venus and the precession of the equinoxes. Precession, in particular, requires observational records spanning thousands of years. No such records have been found. This raises an unresolved scientific gap. Either the Maya had access to inherited knowledge from a much older source, or they achieved a level of astronomical insight that contradicts the limitations of their observable timeline. The Aztec version adds further nuance. They described Quetzalcoatl arriving on a strange object depicted metaphorically as a raft or platform alive with serpentine forms and emitting light. The imagery is symbolic, but the details hint at unfamiliar technology rather than simple poetic invention. Ancient people often use metaphor to describe mechanical or luminous phenomena they could not otherwise explain. What today might be interpreted as engines, metal structures, or emissions of heat and light could easily be described in pre-modern societies as serpents, fire, or divine radiance. Scientific interpretation leans toward mythic allegory, yet these depictions contain structural elements that resemble eyewitness description rather than purely imaginative symbolism. When examined alongside the sudden appearance of advanced scientific knowledge in the region, the possibility that these stories preserve distorted accounts of real encounters becomes difficult to dismiss. Finally, both the Maya and Aztec insisted that the feathered serpent did not simply vanish. They believed he departed with intent, and that his return would occur when the heavens aligned in specific and predictable configurations. This belief was not tied to emotion or faith. It was tied to astronomy. They treated his return as part of a measurable cycle rather than a religious prophecy. The specificity of this claim implies that they viewed the being not as an ethereal deity, but as an entity whose movements corresponded to cosmic rhythms. Whether interpreted through the lens of myth, anthropology, or alternative history, the figure of the feathered serpent presents a profound puzzle. If he was imagined, the level of detail is unusual. If he was symbolic, the scientific implications of his symbolism are striking. And if he was based on memory, then the ancient world may have preserved remnants of a story far larger than traditional history allows. For the Maya and the Aztec, the feathered serpent was not merely a god of imagination. He was a reality of the past and a promise for the future, a visitor whose teachings shaped their world and whose return was expected when the sky signaled the opening of another great cycle. At the northern edge of the Yucatan Peninsula, the Pyramid of El Castillo stands as one of the most iconic structures of the ancient Maya world. Its tiered platforms rise above the surrounding plain with geometric clarity, each angle aligned with deliberate precision. The structure appears deceptively simple at first glance, yet its true nature reveals itself only on two specific days of the year. During the equinoxes, as the sun descends toward the horizon, shadows cast by the terraces weave together along the staircase to form the image of a serpent undulating downward toward a sculpted stone head at the base. This phenomenon is often described as an architectural illusion, a clever interplay of light and shadow. From a scientific standpoint, the effect results from the angle of the sun relative to the steps, causing alternating shadows to fall in a way that creates the appearance of movement. The explanation is straightforward. The phenomenon is not. For the effect to manifest so precisely, the pyramid must be oriented with extraordinary accuracy. The angles of the terraces must be calibrated to match the sun's position during the equinox, and the structure must remain stable enough over centuries for the alignment to continue functioning exactly as intended. This requires a level of astronomical knowledge and architectural foresight that surpasses what is typically attributed to pre-modern societies without advanced instruments. Mainstream archaeology maintains that the Maya achieved this through careful observation of the sun over many generations. According to this view, the builders did not need telescopes or metal tools, only persistent tracking of solar positions and incremental refinements in construction. While this approach may explain some solar alignments, it does not fully resolve the complexity of the serpent phenomenon at Chichen Itza. There is no evidence of earlier prototypes or transitional designs leading up to El Castillo. The pyramid appears in its final form without clear developmental stages. The precision of the alignment is not the result of gradual experimentation, but seems to have been present at the moment of construction. This absence of evolution challenges the assumption that the Maya arrived at such architectural sophistication slowly over time. Additionally, the equinox serpent is not merely a solar marker. Its appearance carries symbolic significance tied to the myth of the feathered serpent, the celestial teacher believed to descend to the world of humans during moments when the boundary between sky and earth grows thin. The architecture does not simply observe the sky. It reenacts a cosmological event embedded in cultural memory. The builders integrated myth, astronomy, and monumental scale into a single coordinated system. The question arises, why would the Maya construct such an elaborate mechanism for the purpose of capturing a moment of sunlight lasting only a few minutes, twice each year? If the goal was merely to track time, far simpler structures would have sufficed. Yet the pyramid is not simple. Its design encodes multiple layers of meaning. The total number of steps corresponds to the solar year. The terraces represent levels of the Maya cosmological underworld. The serpent demonstrates movement, not static symbolism. Some researchers propose that the pyramid served as a massive calendar. Others argue that it was a political statement reinforcing the power of rulers aligned with divine cycles. These explanations account for certain aspects, but do not explain why so many Maya structures across the region incorporate similar alignments, often with astronomical precision that would challenge even modern architects without access to contemporary tools. Alternative interpretations suggest that the Maya may have inherited knowledge from earlier cultures far older than themselves, or that the techniques needed to create such alignments originated from a source outside the traditional archaeological timeline. This hypothesis, while controversial, is partly motivated by the abrupt appearance of advanced astronomical concepts in Maya records. Their ability to track long cycles, such as the 260-day Tzolk'in or the 5,200-year long count, implies a depth of understanding difficult to reconcile with the absence of precursor evidence. Regardless of stance, the serpent of light remains a point where conventional explanations struggle to provide a full account. The alignment is too exact, the symbolism too consistent, the result too deliberate. It is a convergence of architecture and astronomy that borders on the improbable. For the Maya, this event was the embodiment of a story shared across generations. When the serpent appeared, it signaled more than the passage of time. It marked the moment when the sky touched the earth. It represented a descent, a return, a connection to a being who, according to myth, once walked among them and promised to do so again. The phenomenon persists today with the same precision it held centuries ago, its meaning lost to time but its effect unchanged. As the last segment of light reaches the stone serpent's head, the jungle grows still, and for a brief moment it is as if the pyramid remembers. The ancient builders may have intended this event not only as a spectacle, but as a message carved into the fabric of time itself, waiting for future generations to rediscover. The serpent of light does not simply descend. It invites us to question how ancient the knowledge behind it truly is, and whether its purpose was to honor a myth or to signal the eventual reopening of a celestial gate. Deep within the humid lowlands of Chiapas, the city of Palenque rises like a memory carved into the jungle. Its temples are elegant, its inscriptions detailed, and its rulers recorded with unusual sophistication. Among them, one figure stands out not only for the longevity of his reign, but for the mystery that surrounds his burial. His name was Janab Pakal, remembered today simply as Lord Pakal, and the artwork carved on the lid of his sarcophagus remains one of the most debated images in ancient American archaeology. Discovered in the mid-20th century beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions, Pakal's tomb revealed a massive stone slab intricately carved with symbols and imagery that have fueled both academic study and alternative theories. In the carving, Pakal is shown in a position unlike traditional depictions of Maya rulers. Rather than seated or standing in ritual posture, he appears to be reclining at an angle, with his legs bent upward and his hands positioned near an array of complex shapes surrounding his body. According to the mainstream interpretation, this scene represents Pakal's journey into the Maya underworld, visualized through the world tree that connects the realms of heaven, earth, and the dead. In this reading, the surrounding elements are purely cosmological symbols, and the unusual posture is treated as a stylized artistic convention. Scholars point out that Maya art frequently merges deities, rulers, and mythic geography into a single narrative, and therefore the lid should be understood within that symbolic framework. yet the image presents details that conventional explanations struggle to fully resolve. Some of the surrounding shapes, typically described as mythological motifs, include lines and structures with a rigidity more reminiscent of mechanical components than organic iconography. The object near Pakal's mouth resembles a form of nosepiece or breathing apparatus, while his hands appear positioned as if interacting with controls. Beneath him, flame-like patterns create an impression of upward movement or propulsion rather than descent into the earth. Most archaeologists view these interpretations cautiously, noting that ancient artists often combine symbolic elements in ways that modern viewers can misinterpret. However, specialists also acknowledge that Palenque's iconography has few parallels to the posture and spatial composition seen on Pakal's lid. No other Maya carving depicts a ruler in such a dynamic, almost mechanical arrangement. This lack of comparable examples complicates the argument that the piece fits neatly within known religious symbolism. Even within standard archaeological context, Pakal's tomb is unusual. The internal staircase leading to the chamber was sealed shortly after burial, a feature shared with only a handful of other Mesoamerican structures. The chamber lies deep beneath the pyramid, in a layout that appears intentionally designed to create a symbolic descent. While elite tombs often conveyed cosmological meaning, the architectural complexity of Pakal's burial suggests that his interment carried significance beyond common funerary practice. Scientific analysis of Pakal's remains adds another layer of intrigue. Anthropological measurements indicate that he was taller than the average Maya male and possessed skeletal traits uncommon among regional samples. Although such differences do not indicate foreign origin, they have contributed to ongoing debate. Some researchers attribute these features to local variation or royal lineage, while others note that unusual physical characteristics combined with an extraordinary tomb reflect a ruler perceived as exceptional even by Maya standards. When evaluated through a scientific lens, the challenge lies not in choosing between symbolic or literal interpretations, but in addressing why the artwork resists straightforward categorization. If the lid is a purely mythological representation, its departure from conventional Maya iconography is striking. If it encodes historical memory interpreted through artistic metaphor, it implies events or ideas outside typical archaeological timelines. This ambiguity explains why Pakal's tomb remains central to discussions about Maya cosmology, lineage, and contact narratives. Archaeologists emphasize the importance of interpreting ancient art within cultural context, noting that the Maya blended myth and power in sophisticated ways. However, the unique combination of posture, structure, and composition on Pakal's lid continues to raise questions. For a civilization that rarely depicted technological imagery, this carving stands as an anomaly. Its elements suggest movement, machinery, and interaction with structured forms, features uncommon in Maya religious art. The Maya believed their kings acted as intermediaries between the human world and the divine. Pakal himself traced his lineage to figures connected to celestial events and deities. His tomb may therefore reflect his perceived relationship to cosmic origins. Whether the imagery is symbolic, commemorative, or derived from interpretations of extraordinary phenomena, it reinforces his identity as a ruler tied to the sky. The possibility that the lid preserves memory rather than metaphor cannot be dismissed. It may depict an idea or event the Maya attempted to represent with the artistic vocabulary available to them. In this sense, the carving could reflect an encounter, a mythologized experience, or a technological concept interpreted through the lens of Maya cosmology. Whatever its meaning, the sarcophagus lid remains one of the most extraordinary artifacts found in the ancient Americas. It blends mythic symbolism with details that defy easy explanation, challenging the boundaries of archaeological interpretation. Lord Pakal lies beneath the stone, but the story carved above him extends far beyond the tomb itself. It hints at knowledge, origin, and perhaps encounters that shaped Maya civilization in ways not yet fully understood. Pakal's final image is not merely a depiction of death. It is a stone puzzle crafted with precision, inviting future generations to reconsider what the Maya may have witnessed, why they preserved this moment so meticulously, and what message they intended to leave behind. In the ruins of Copan, deep within the western highlands of Honduras, a single monument captures the intersection between human history and divine ancestry more clearly than any other surviving structure in the Maya world. It is known simply as the hieroglyphic stairway, a massive flight of 72 steps carved with more than 2,000 glyphs. Together, these inscriptions form the longest known Maya text and preserve a narrative that blends political history with celestial identity. From an archaeological perspective, the stairway is a monumental record of dynastic succession. It recounts the lineage of Copan's rulers beginning with the founder, Chicomoztoc, and continuing through nearly 4 centuries of reigns. Mainstream scholars describe it as a political statement, a stone document crafted to legitimize royal authority by tying each king to ancestral tradition. However, the deeper one reads into the glyphs, the more apparent it becomes that the Maya concept of lineage was not limited to earthly heritage. The text repeatedly emphasizes celestial connections, referencing gods, stars, and cosmological events in ways that modern political histories rarely include. For the Maya elite, legitimacy was inseparable from the belief that rulers originated from beings associated with the heavens. The founding figure, Chicomoztoc, is described not merely as a conqueror or migrant leader, but as an individual who arrived with symbols linked to divine power. Some glyphs portray him with features typically reserved for deities, such as circular eye markings and celestial insignia. Archaeologists often explain these elements as royal propaganda intended to strengthen dynastic authority, yet the degree of celestial emphasis in Copan's records exceeds what is usually considered symbolic exaggeration, prompting debate about whether these portrayals reflect purely ideological claims or the preservation of older, mythologized memories. A central point of scientific discussion concerns the astronomical references embedded in the stairway. Several passages align significant royal events with rare celestial phenomena, including notable planetary configurations and cycles of Venus. Mainstream interpretation argues that these alignments served symbolic or ritual functions. But the precision with which these events correspond to real astronomical cycles raises questions about how the Maya achieved such accuracy. Predicting these cycles requires long-term observational data, yet physical evidence for the incremental development of those records remains sparse. Here lies the core of the controversy. The stairway does not simply recount the story of kings, it ties their authority to moments of cosmic significance. To accept the conventional view, one must assume that the Maya possessed extensive observational archives or inherited astronomical knowledge from earlier cultures, even though no such precursor documents or tools have been conclusively identified. This theoretical inheritance model solves part of the puzzle, but introduces a greater question. If an older civilization transmitted such knowledge, why does its cultural footprint appear so faint, and why does Maya astronomy enter the archaeological record already mature rather than gradually evolving? The literacy patterns at Copan raise additional questions. Only a small elite class could read the glyphs carved on the stairway. The broader population would have experienced the monument through ceremony and performance rather than textual understanding. If the stairway was intended primarily as propaganda, one would expect more accessible visual narratives. Instead, the inscriptions include complex astronomical, mythological, and genealogical information meaningful only to a specialized audience. This suggests the monument served not merely as public display, but as an archival document meant to preserve esoteric knowledge for future generations. The 13th ruler of Copan, depicted on a carved stela near the stairway, further underscores this complexity. His portrait associates him with celestial oversight and semi-divine status, describing guidance from beings dwelling in the heavens. While mainstream archaeology interprets this as metaphorical language reinforcing royal authority, the frequency and specificity of such claims across Copan's inscriptions suggest a deeper cosmological framework. The Maya perception of kingship blurred the line between spiritual ancestry and physical lineage in a way that does not neatly match modern political categories. Even within a strictly scientific context, the hieroglyphic stairway presents challenges. The absence of architectural parallels in the Maya world suggests that Copan's rulers invested significant effort into preserving this unique record. The inscriptions show signs of reassembly after collapse, indicating that later generations recognized the text's importance and attempted to preserve it despite structural failure. If the stairway served merely as dynastic propaganda, its unusually careful preservation becomes harder to explain. Whether interpreted through anthropology, astronomy, or alternative historical frameworks, the monument implies that the Maya viewed their rulers as individuals whose origins extended beyond ordinary human ancestry. The stairway is both a record and a declaration. Authority flowed not only through earthly bloodlines, but through connections to the stars and the beings believed to dwell within them. In this sense, the boundary between myth and history becomes permeable. The Maya did not separate celestial events from political narratives because they understood the two as interconnected. Their kings were custodians of cosmic order, standing at the intersection of the human world and the divine. The hieroglyphic stairway stands as a testament to this worldview. It invites modern researchers to reconsider whether the Maya were simply recording royal genealogy or preserving memories, filtered through religious language, of encounters or knowledge that shaped their civilization in ways conventional history has yet to fully grasp. Whatever the truth, the narrative carved into the stone steps continues upward, bridging human chronology with something older, broader, and far more mysterious. The Maya did not view the sky as a distant dome or a symbolic canvas. To them, it was a living system governed by cycles that shaped both the natural world and human destiny. Their cities were designed as instruments to measure celestial motion. Their rituals followed the rhythms of planets. Their histories were anchored to astronomical events. This level of celestial integration distinguishes them from most ancient cultures and raises questions about how they acquired such sophisticated knowledge. Archaeologists often describe the Maya as exceptional observers who, over generations, developed the ability to identify and predict the behavior of the sun, moon, and visible planets. This explanation accounts for many aspects of Maya astronomy, yet it becomes increasingly strained when addressing their most advanced calculations. The Maya not only tracked eclipses and solstices, but also monitored the motion of Venus with an accuracy rivaling modern measurements. They understood the synodic cycle of Venus, a period of 584 days, and integrated this cycle into their calendrical systems. Their codices demonstrate that they could predict the planet's appearances and disappearances with remarkable precision. While careful observation can reveal Venus's movement, identifying its long-term cycles with this level of detail would require maintaining consistent records over several centuries. The challenge arises from the fact that the archaeological record shows sudden leaps in Maya astronomical capability rather than a gradual developmental curve. There are few transitional documents indicating a long build-up of data collection. Their knowledge appears fully formed when it enters the historical record. An even more difficult question emerges in relation to precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that alters the position of stars over a cycle of roughly 26,000 years. Detecting precession requires comparing stellar positions across very long time spans. Conventional science maintains that ancient cultures lacked the observational records necessary to identify it. Yet certain Maya structures, including those aligned with the movements of particular constellations, suggest an awareness of changes that unfold over periods far longer than a single civilization typically endures. Some scholars argue that these alignments are coincidental or that later builders adapted earlier structures to new astronomical purposes. Others suggest that the Maya encoded mythic cycles into their architecture, using stars symbolically rather than scientifically. These interpretations offer partial explanations but do not resolve the underlying issue. The Maya appear to have possessed an understanding of cycles that would normally require many thousands of years of accumulated observation. The long count calendar deepens the mystery. Extending over 5,000 years, it does not merely record time but maps cosmic eras. It treats time as a sequence of vast cycles, each associated with creation, destruction, or transformation. The precision with which these cycles track astronomical patterns implies that the Maya were working within a conceptual framework that predates their civilization. If they inherited this framework, its origin remains unknown. Alternative models propose that earlier, now lost, cultures may have developed this knowledge and passed it forward. While this possibility cannot be fully dismissed, no such predecessor has been definitively identified in the archaeological record. The absence of material evidence leaves open the question of where the foundational data for the Maya system originated. The Caracol Observatory at Chichen Itza reflects another layer of complexity. Its windows and sightlines align with significant celestial events, including the extreme positions of Venus on the horizon. The structure's circular design is unique in Maya architecture and appears tailored for astronomical use. The engineering precision needed to construct it suggests specialized knowledge beyond the scope of typical temple building. Mainstream interpretations explain these achievements by attributing them to sophisticated indigenous science. This view is supported by the undeniable mathematical talent of the Maya, who independently developed the concept of zero and used positional notation. Yet even within this framework, unanswered questions remain. Why did the Maya focus so intensely on astronomical cycles that unfold across millennia? Why do their myths emphasize teachers who arrived during celestial alignments? Why do multiple independent sites show the same advanced knowledge appearing at similar moments in time? The convergence of myth and data creates a narrative that resists simple categorization. On one hand, the Maya clearly possessed extraordinary intellectual capacity. On the other, their sudden mastery of complex cycles suggests an infusion of knowledge that exceeded what their observational history can explain. Whether this knowledge emerged through cultural inheritance, accelerated development, or encounters interpreted through mythology, the result is the same. The Maya became astronomers of a scale rarely seen in the ancient world. Their understanding of the heavens was not only scientific, but deeply integrated into their worldview. They saw the sky not as a backdrop, but as a system of messages, cycles, and signs left by forces older than humanity. The question that lingers is simple yet profound. If the Maya recognized the heavens with such clarity, what were they preparing for? And why did they believe that certain celestial events marked the return of the very beings who taught them how to read the sky? Their astronomy was not a passive record, it was a map. And maps are created for journeys. Among all the calendrical systems of the ancient world, the Maya long count stands apart in both scale and intention. It does not simply track seasonal cycles or agricultural markers. Instead, it maps epochs spanning thousands of years and divides time into grand eras that begin and end according to astronomical events. For the Maya, these transitions were not metaphors. They represented real changes in the structure of the world, moments when creation and destruction converged. The most widely known of these transitions is the cycle ending in 2012, a date often mischaracterized as a doomsday prediction. For the Maya, however, this moment was never described as annihilation. It was interpreted as renewal, a boundary between worlds, and a point when the cosmic order shifts. The question that continues to challenge scholars is how the Maya determined the length of this cycle and why it aligns so closely with rare astronomical configurations. Central to this mystery is the Dark Rift, a dense region in the Milky Way where interstellar dust obscures the galactic center. To the naked eye, it appears as a dividing band across the night sky. To modern astronomy, it marks the location of the galaxy's central bulge and the supermassive black hole around which the Milky Way rotates. The Maya viewed this region as the birthplace of stars and the conduit through which cosmic energies flow. They believed it represented the mouth of a celestial serpent or the opening through which creation emerges. While mainstream scholars interpret this as symbolic mythology, several Maya narratives describe the Dark Rift with surprising specificity. Their artwork often depicts it as a vertical fissure associated with birthing scenes or cosmic portals. This level of detail is striking given that the Maya would not have known the true nature of the galactic center through naked eye observation alone. Some anthropologists suggest that such precision reflects a symbolic interpretation refined over generations. Yet this explanation does not fully account for how closely the Maya associated the Dark Rift with astronomical timing. The end of the long count in 2012 coincided with a rare alignment in which the Sun appeared to rest within the Dark Rift during the winter solstice. This event is part of a multi-thousand-year process, making it impossible to observe directly within a single human lifetime. Predicting it requires an understanding of precession, the slow movement of Earth's axis, which shifts the position of the Sun relative to the Milky Way over long periods. Conventional archaeology maintains that precession was not known to the Maya in a scientific sense. However, the alignment's significance in their mythology suggests a functional awareness of cycles that unfold over vast spans of time. One could argue that the alignment is coincidental, yet the Maya explicitly tied the end of their calendar cycle to a moment in which the Sun intersects the galactic plane. Such intentionality raises questions about how they determine this connection. The absence of intermediate records documenting long-term astronomical measurements complicates the mainstream model, which relies on the assumption that Maya timekeeping evolved gradually. Instead, the system appears abruptly in the archaeological record, with fully formed understanding of cycles far longer than their civilization's documented history. Some researchers propose that the Maya may have inherited fragments of astronomical knowledge from older societies, possibly dating back to the end of the last ice age. Others suggest that their interpretations of mythic cycles incidentally aligned with astronomical phenomena. While these proposals offer partial explanations, they do not address the precision with which Maya cycles match real celestial events. The alignment with the Dark Rift carries another dimension. Maya inscriptions suggest that such moments mark times when the boundary between the human world and the divine becomes permeable. These beliefs are not isolated to Mesoamerica. In other ancient cultures, celestial alignments often correspond to myths of descent, visitation, or transformation. The global recurrence of this idea hints at a shared perception of the heavens as active participants in human history. For the Maya, the end of a cycle meant the reopening of a cosmic passage. Their texts imply that during these transitions, beings associated with the sky may return. Whether interpreted metaphorically or literally, the belief is consistent. Astronomical alignment signals the movement of forces that shape the world. Modern astronomy acknowledges the importance of celestial events, but does not attribute historical significance to them. Yet unresolved questions remain. How did the Maya determine a cycle that aligns with rare astronomical configurations? Why is the end of the long count linked so precisely to the Sun's position within the Milky Way? Why did they associate this moment with the return of beings described as teachers or visitors? Scientific explanations account for some patterns but not all. The Maya possessed an understanding of cosmic cycles that, according to conventional models, should have required tools and records they did not have. Their calendar suggests an awareness of galactic structure far beyond what would be expected from naked eye observation. To the Maya, the end of time was not a threat. It was an opening, a moment when the world resets and the sky connects once more with the earth. Whether viewed through the lens of myth, memory, or science, the alignment with the Dark Rift remains one of the most intriguing intersections between ancient belief and cosmic reality. And if the Maya were correct, then such alignments are not mere astronomical curiosities. They are markers, signals, moments when the gate between worlds draws closer to opening again. Long before the rise of the Maya, long before humans walked the continent, a cataclysm reshaped the surface of the Earth. A massive object from space struck the region now known as the Yucatan Peninsula, carving out the Chicxulub crater and triggering environmental collapse on a global scale. Modern geology associates this event with the end of the Cretaceous period, yet its geographical location creates an unsettling coincidence. The heartland of the Maya civilization sits directly atop the scar left by that ancient impact. To the Maya, the idea of a world destroyed by forces descending from the sky was not metaphorical. Their mythologies describe earlier ages wiped out by fire, darkness, or celestial upheaval. These stories, though filtered through symbolic language, contain details that mirror real geological phenomena. Some anthropologists suggest that myths of cosmic destruction emerge naturally across cultures as explanations for environmental trauma. However, the specificity with which the Maya located cosmic danger in the very region shaped by a prehistoric impact remains striking. The landscape of the Yucatan itself may have reinforced these narratives. The region is filled with circular sinkholes known as cenotes, formed through the collapse of limestone into underground water systems, many of which trace the outline of the impact's rim. The Maya considered cenotes sacred portals to the underworld. From a scientific perspective, their formation can be explained by natural geological processes. Yet their distribution, so closely aligned with an ancient crater invisible to the people who lived above it, suggests that the Maya built their cosmology atop an area shaped by a catastrophic event they could not have known occurred. This convergence of geology and mythology invites reflection. While mainstream science views the Chicxulub impact as unrelated to human history, the possibility remains that its geological aftermath influenced Maya settlement patterns, symbolic geography, and stories of destruction and renewal. The Maya may have perceived something unique about the land without understanding the cause. Another layer of mystery emerges in the depictions of creatures in Maya art that resemble animals believed to have gone extinct millions of years before humans appeared. Scholars traditionally classify these images as stylized representations of serpents, monsters, or composite beings rather than literal depictions. In many cases, this interpretation is valid. However, certain carvings and murals display anatomical features such as elongated necks, armored backs, or distinctive silhouettes that bear resemblance to prehistoric species. One explanation is that the Maya encountered fossils and interpreted them according to their mythological framework. This idea is consistent with how other ancient cultures responded to fossil discoveries. Yet some depictions studied across the Maya region include details that do not align easily with fossil interpretation alone. Fossils typically preserve skeletal forms, but Maya images occasionally reflect soft tissue outlines or postures that would be difficult to infer from bones alone. Such instances are rare, and mainstream archaeologists generally attribute them to artistic imagination or symbolic embellishment. Still, the question persists. Why do a small number of these representations correspond so closely to creatures from eras far more ancient than human memory? A more grounded scientific approach suggests that these images belong to a long tradition of mythic animal iconography, which frequently blends traits from multiple species to convey symbolic meaning. This explanation accounts for many depictions, but does not fully resolve those cases whose features align with extinct species in ways that appear unusually detailed. While coincidence or stylization remains the conventional answer, the possibility that these images encode ancient interpretations of fossil discoveries cannot be dismissed. Beyond artistic anomalies, several Maya myths describe the sky itself as capable of delivering destruction. Stories of fiery serpents falling to earth or of blazing objects streaking across the horizon evoke imagery reminiscent of meteor impacts. While such accounts could reflect sightings of smaller meteor events, the narrative similarities across multiple Mesoamerican cultures suggest a collective awareness of celestial danger. Some myths of sky stones or flaming blades descending to Earth bear descriptive elements that align with eyewitness accounts of meteors or bolides recorded in other ancient civilizations. Scientists acknowledge that large meteor events have occurred throughout human history, though none comparable to Chicxulub within the timeframe of civilization. Still, cultural memory can preserve the psychological impact of rare but intense natural events for generations. It is conceivable that transformative celestial phenomena witnessed in the ancient past contributed to the development of myths describing destructive forces from above. However, a more provocative hypothesis arises when considering the Maya emphasis on cycles of destruction followed by renewal. Their cosmology presents the universe as subject to recurring creation events, initiated or concluded by dramatic shifts in celestial alignment. If their myths preserve fragments of older knowledge, possibly inherited from cultures that experience significant environmental upheavals, then the recurring theme of skyborne catastrophe may encode more than symbolic fear. It may represent an enduring cultural awareness of Earth's vulnerability to cosmic events. In this context, the Maya view of the heavens becomes more comprehensible. Their belief that the sky could end worlds was not merely spiritual speculation. It was a conclusion drawn from the understanding that great cycles hold both creative and destructive potential. The alignment of their civilization with the remnants of an ancient impact zone only intensifies the uniqueness of this worldview. Whether their stories reflect distant geological echoes, fossil interpretations, celestial observations, or inherited knowledge, the Maya clearly recognized a profound connection between the sky and the destiny of the Earth. Their myths, architecture, and rituals all point toward a belief that forces descending from above had shaped both the land beneath them and the world they inhabited. The forbidden memory of the fallen sky may not be a literal recollection, but it remains an enduring reminder that the Maya saw the cosmos not as inert space, but as a realm of active and transformative power. And in their eyes, the boundary between sky and earth was never as distant as we imagine. In the central highlands of Mexico, long before the rise of the Aztec Empire, a narrative shaped the identity of migrating tribes. This narrative was neither a simple origin myth nor a local legend. It was a story of emergence, descent, and the appearance of a mysterious object that crashed from the heavens. According to Aztec tradition, their ancestors came from a place known as Chicomoztoc, the Seven Caves, a location described with an unusual combination of symbolic meaning and architectural specificity. The Seven Caves were not portrayed as ordinary caverns. Aztec codices depict them as chambers arranged in a circular or radial pattern, each large enough to house a clan or lineage group. The imagery includes features resembling structured entrances, layered walls, and interior divisions that evoke intentional design more than natural geology. Some scholars explain this as artistic stylization. Others argue that Chicomoztoc represents a spiritual metaphor, symbolizing the birth of tribes from the womb of the earth. These interpretations align with common mythic themes, but do not fully account for the persistent structural detail found across depictions. A point of scientific interest arises from the discovery of a multi-chambered cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan. This cave, shaped in a cruciform pattern, contains 4 main chambers and additional smaller recesses. Although not identical to the 7-chamber layout described in Aztec mythology, the structural similarities raise the possibility that the Chicomoztoc tradition may have been influenced by real architectural sites known to ancient peoples. Some anthropologists suggest that such caves served as sacred spaces for earlier cultures, whose memory survived into Aztec times. While this explanation is plausible, it does not address the second and far more puzzling element of the origin story. In one of the most extraordinary accounts recorded by early chroniclers, a massive flint blade is said to have fallen from the sky, striking the earth with enough force to cause tremors. When the object cracked open, more than 1,000 beings emerged from within it. These beings, described as gods or culture bearers, went on to guide early peoples and influence the development of societies in the region. From a scientific standpoint, this story is traditionally categorized as pure mythology, perhaps inspired by meteor sightings or ritual symbolism. However, its details diverge from typical mythic motifs. First, the object is described as opening rather than exploding or disintegrating, which is not characteristic of meteors. Second, the emergence of beings from within a descending object is a narrative feature rarely associated with natural celestial events. Third, the account includes sensory descriptions such as brightness, noise, and impact that resemble eyewitness testimonies of real phenomena rather than abstract allegory. Some researchers propose that these narratives may reflect distant memories of meteor impacts blended with symbolic storytelling. This approach aligns with known patterns of myth formation, where natural events are transformed into stories that incorporate divine or supernatural elements. Yet this model does not fully explain the consistent portrayal of the descending object as structured, hollow, and capable of releasing occupants. The possibility arises that the story reflects a cultural interpretation of an unfamiliar technological event, later encoded into mythology. Ancient peoples lacked vocabulary for mechanical structures, so they used the closest analogies available. A gleaming object could be compared to stone. Movement through the sky could be described through metaphors of falling blades or serpents. The opening of a craft could be interpreted as the splitting of stone. While speculative, this perspective highlights how limited linguistic frameworks can shape descriptions of extraordinary experiences. The Seven Caves narrative carries additional implications. The emergence of tribes from chambers echoes the idea of people being organized or guided by external forces. If interpreted symbolically, it reflects social order. If interpreted literally, it suggests an encounter with structured environments or groups. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that complex subterranean structures existed in the region, some of which date to periods earlier than the Aztec. Whether or not these sites influenced the myth of Chicomoztoc remains a subject of ongoing research. Another point of debate concerns the Aztec belief that the gods who emerged from the falling object were not immortal beings, but physical entities who lived, interacted with humans, and eventually departed. This perception differs from many mythological systems in which gods remain purely supernatural. Instead, the Aztec described their deities as having life cycles and journeys, resembling more the roles of cultural heroes or advanced teachers. Some scholars interpret this as evidence of syncretism, where older human figures were eventually elevated to divine status. Others see it as a reflection of a worldview in which the boundary between the spiritual and physical realms was fluid. Yet the specificity of the descriptions, particularly concerning the descent event, challenges the idea that this is purely metaphorical. Scientific interpretations remain grounded in symbolic analysis, but they acknowledge gaps. The Aztec migration narratives are unusually consistent across sources, and the depiction of a falling object containing multiple beings is unique in Mesoamerican literature. While parallels exist in myths from other continents, their appearance in an Aztec context raises questions about shared archetypes or convergent mythic development. Whether regarded as allegory, inherited memory, or a distorted account of an extraordinary event, the Chicomoztoc narrative demonstrates the complexity of ancient origin stories. It intertwines geological landscapes, architectural mysteries, and cosmic descent in ways that continue to intrigue historians, anthropologists, and alternative theorists alike. For the Aztec, the story was not merely a legend. It defined their identity. It marked the beginning of their people. And it reminded them that their origins were tied to forces descending from the sky, shaping the world before recorded history began. On the northeastern edge of the Valley of Mexico lies a site that challenges the foundations of archaeological interpretation. Teotihuacan, one of the largest and most influential cities of the ancient world, rises from the landscape with an architectural order and scale unmatched in pre-Columbian America. At its height, it hosted a population comparable to major cities of the classical Mediterranean. Yet no records identify its rulers, its founding people, or the architects who designed its monumental core. This absence forms one of the central puzzles of Teotihuacan. Most ancient civilizations leave behind written accounts, dynastic lists, or inscriptions glorifying leaders. Even societies with limited literacy record their rulers in symbolic or artistic form. Teotihuacan is different. It presents a fully developed urban grid, monumental pyramids, administrative complexes, and advanced infrastructure, yet no definitive evidence of kingship. The absence of royal iconography is striking given the size and sophistication of the city. Archaeologists traditionally interpret this as a sign of collective governance or an ideology that de-emphasized monarchy. While possible, this explanation remains speculative and does not account for how such large-scale coordination could occur without centralized authority. Compounding the mystery is the city's architectural maturity from the earliest excavated layers. Structures such as the Pyramid of the Sun, Pyramid of the Moon, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent appear in forms that demonstrate advanced engineering knowledge. There is no clear progression from simple to complex. Instead, Teotihuacan appears in the archaeological record as a complete, fully realized urban plan. Mainstream interpretations suggest that earlier structures may lie beneath current excavations, or that architectural evolution occurred in periods not yet uncovered. However, decades of research have not revealed clear transitional phases. The alignment of Teotihuacan's central axis, tilted approximately 15 degrees east of north, adds another dimension to the debate. Some researchers propose astronomical motivations, noting potential alignments with the setting of the Pleiades or significant solar events. Others argue that the orientation reflects practical considerations such as local topography or water flow. Both viewpoints carry merit, yet unresolved questions remain regarding the precision of the layout and its possible connections to cycles tracked by other Mesoamerican cultures. Beneath the Pyramid of the Sun lies a cave whose shape echoes the Chicomoztoc imagery found in Aztec origin stories. The cave's cruciform structure, with 4 radiating chambers, suggests ritual significance. Some anthropologists propose that the selection of the site for the pyramid may have been influenced by the presence of this geological feature. This connection between mythology and site planning remains debated. Still, the cave's central placement hints at a conceptual link between sacred geography and architectural intent. Perhaps the most enigmatic discovery at Teotihuacan is the tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, found in 2003 and explored extensively in the years that followed. The tunnel, sealed intentionally in antiquity, contains thousands of artifacts, including spherical objects coated in pyrite, which reflect light like stars in torchlit darkness. Pools of liquid mercury were found in deeper chambers, a substance extremely rare in Mesoamerican context. Some researchers interpret these materials as symbolic representations of the underworld or cosmic realms. Others have noted that the reflective properties of pyrite and mercury create visual effects reminiscent of celestial environments. While there is no consensus about the tunnel's function, its complexity suggests that Teotihuacan's builders engineered spaces intended to model or invoke cosmic phenomena. Mainstream archaeology proposes that Teotihuacan developed through regional interaction networks and population migrations, leading to a multicultural urban environment. Evidence supports the presence of diverse ethnic groups within the city. However, this model does not fully address how disparate communities united to construct architectural works requiring coordinated effort, advanced planning, and extensive resources. The city's uniformity implies a guiding vision, yet its ideological or administrative centre remains elusive. An alternative line of inquiry examines the possibility that Teotihuacan inherited knowledge or traditions from earlier, less understood cultures. If this were the case, the absence of clear predecessors challenges the narrative of linear development. The Olmec civilization is sometimes cited as a potential source of influence, but its decline predates Teotihuacan by centuries and direct connections remain sparse. The idea of a lost intermediary culture appears in speculative literature but lacks substantial archaeological support. Another perspective considers that Teotihuacan's monumental architecture served as a form of symbolic communication. Its orientation, scale, and repeated motifs may reflect an attempt to encode cosmological principles into urban design. Some researchers argue that the city's layout corresponds to specific constellations, forming a terrestrial reflection of the sky. While such theories remain debated, they highlight the Maya and later Aztec perception of Teotihuacan as a place where divine forces interacted with the human world. When the Aztec encountered the ruins centuries after the city's collapse, they named it Teotihuacan, meaning the place where gods became gods. This name reflects their belief that transformative events occurred here, events linked to celestial cycles and mythic creation. Although this interpretation is mythological, its persistence indicates that Teotihuacan held an aura of antiquity and sacredness even among cultures who arrived long after its end. The scientific challenges remain. If Teotihuacan developed independently, why does its architectural sophistication surpass what the archaeological sequence suggests? If it inherited knowledge from older cultures, where are the transitional sites? If its builders encoded cosmic patterns into stone, what motivated such precision and how did they achieve it? Teotihuacan stands as a paradox. It is a city without a known builder, a civilization without a named king, and an achievement without a clear origin. Whether interpreted through scientific investigation or mythic tradition, it continues to defy complete explanation, inviting ongoing scrutiny into the forces and influences that shaped it. Beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent at Teotihuacan lies one of the most unusual discoveries in Mesoamerican archaeology, a hidden tunnel, sealed intentionally over 1,700 years ago, preserved in complete darkness until the early 21st century. Its existence was unknown until ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly beneath the temple, suggesting chambers and passages far more extensive than any previously recorded beneath the site. When archaeologists began excavating the passage, they found it deliberately filled with earth and debris, as though someone in antiquity sought to conceal whatever lay inside. The act of sealing appeared methodical, not the result of collapse or abandonment. Once the material was removed, the tunnel revealed a series of interconnected chambers adorned with substances and artifacts that defy easy explanation. The walls of the passage were coated with pyrite dust, creating a shimmering effect when illuminated by torchlight as though the stone itself contained stars. This detail raised immediate questions. Pyrite does not naturally accumulate in this manner, suggesting intentional application. Some researchers interpret this as symbolic representation of the night sky or the underworld. Others point out that the reflective surfaces create a controlled visual environment, similar to immersive ceremonial chambers found in other ancient cultures. While the symbolic interpretation is plausible, the level of effort involved hints at a more elaborate purpose. Among the most discussed discoveries were hundreds of spherical objects scattered across the tunnel floor. These orbs, made of clay and coated in pyrite, gleamed like golden spheres in the dim light. They are unique to this location. No equivalent objects have been identified elsewhere in Mesoamerica. Theories surrounding their purpose vary. Some scholars argue that they were ritual offerings symbolizing stars, deities, or celestial bodies. Others propose that they were used in ceremonies involving movement, sound, or reflection, potentially creating sensory experiences within the confined space. The scientific challenge lies in understanding why such objects were produced in large quantities and why they were stored in an underground environment. Their fragile construction suggests they were not utilitarian, yet their number indicates significance. No consensus has emerged regarding their symbolic or functional meaning. Further into the tunnel, chambers contain deposits of liquid mercury. The presence of mercury in Mesoamerican sites is rare, but not entirely unprecedented. It was sometimes associated with underworld symbolism or used for ritualistic purposes. However, the quantity found at Teotihuacan and its combination with pyrite coatings suggests an intentional design to create reflective surfaces that interact with light. The shimmering pools and glittering walls may have been meant to evoke celestial realms or to simulate a cosmic environment within the Earth. Some anthropologists propose that the tunnel functioned as a ceremonial pathway representing the journey into the underworld. This interpretation is consistent with wider Mesoamerican beliefs about caves as portals between realms. Yet the unique elements found here, especially the combination of materials designed to manipulate light, raise questions about whether ritual symbolism fully accounts for the chamber's engineering complexity. The reflective qualities of pyrite and mercury suggest a deliberate attempt to create immersive visual effects rarely seen in ancient ritual spaces. The deeper sections of the tunnel lead to a large chamber directly beneath the pyramid. This area held a concentration of artifacts, including jade figurines, shells from distant coasts, obsidian blades, and other offerings typically associated with high-status burials or cosmic symbolism. Surprisingly, no human remains were found, despite the chamber's size and the richness of its offerings. This absence has sparked debate about whether the space was meant for a burial, a ritual reenactment, or something else entirely. Some scholars argue that the chamber may have represented a model of the cosmos, a symbolic recreation of celestial order beneath the earthly pyramid. This interpretation aligns with the broader view of Teotihuacan as a city organized according to cosmological principles. Others suggest that the chamber could have served as a site for initiation, prophecy, or political ceremony. Still, none of these explanations account for the engineering sophistication or the decision to seal the tunnel completely. From a scientific perspective, the strongest unresolved question is why the tunnel was closed so carefully. Sealing a space of this magnitude required extensive labor and coordination. If the chamber had merely fallen out of use, abandonment would have been easier. Instead, the closing appears intentional, as though the occupants wished to protect or hide what lay within. Alternative theories posit that the tunnel may have served as a restricted ceremonial chamber for an elite priesthood or ruling class. Others propose that it was connected to astronomical events, or used for interactions interpreted as divine or supernatural. Some more speculative viewpoints suggest that the chamber may have housed rituals involving phenomena that ancient observers understood as contact with entities from the sky. While such interpretations lie outside mainstream consensus, they arise from the unique combination of materials and the chamber's cosmic symbolism. What remains certain is that the tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent offers a rare glimpse into a world where architecture, light, and cosmology converged. It is a space designed not merely to inspire reverence, but to create an environment distinct from everyday life, one in which sensory perception was shaped intentionally. Whether it served ritual, symbolic, or experiential purposes, its construction required knowledge and intent beyond ordinary ceremonial practice. Even today, the chamber retains an atmosphere of mystery. The reflective walls mimic the night sky. The golden spheres resemble stars scattered across a cosmic field. The mercury pools create illusions of infinite depth. Standing within the tunnel, it is easy to imagine that the builders sought to recreate something they believed existed beyond the earth, a realm where the gods came from and where they would return. The tunnel remains sealed not by debris, but by questions, and the meaning behind its construction continues to elude definitive scientific explanation, leaving room for interpretations that bridge the boundary between archaeology and the unknown. On the island of Euboea in Greece, far from the jungles of Mesoamerica, yet curiously parallel in mythic structure, stand a series of enigmatic buildings known as the dragon houses. These structures sit atop high, windswept peaks, constructed with stone blocks so massive and precisely fitted that their engineering challenges both archaeological and architectural expectations. They have no mortar, no supporting beams, and no explanation that fits neatly within the timeline of Greek construction. Their origin remains uncertain. Most date estimates place them well before the classical Greek era, with some scholars proposing that they may predate the rise of the Mycenaean civilization. The challenge lies in the fact that these structures do not resemble typical Greek architecture. They lack ceramic remains or cultural artifacts that would identify their builders. Their form is neither domestic nor defensive. No signs of long-term habitation exist. Instead, each dragon house appears more like a ceremonial chamber placed deliberately at the highest possible vantage points. The most famous of these sites atop Mount Ochi, at nearly 1,500 meters above sea level. The effort required to transport multi-ton slabs to such an elevation raises immediate questions. Mainstream archaeology suggests that the structures may have been built by shepherds as seasonal shelters or by regional groups for ritual purposes. However, this interpretation struggles to justify the precise engineering and immense labor involved. Temporary shelters would have been constructed with modest materials. Ritual structures would likely align with more accessible locations unless tied to specific cosmological principles. Some researchers propose that the dragon houses served as ancient observatories, positioned to track celestial events or horizon markers. Their elevated locations offer expansive views of the sky and sea. While this remains a reasonable hypothesis, the architectural style does not clearly match known observatory types from the region. Furthermore, no inscriptions or astronomical markers have been found that would confirm this purpose. The name Dragon House originates not from mythical reptiles, but from the ancient Greek term drakontes, which referred to powerful beings or guardians often associated with sacred places. The association between these mountains and divine descent appears in local traditions. Some legends claim that Zeus himself descended or manifested in these high regions. Although such narratives are mythological, they reflect long-standing cultural perceptions of the area as a place where the boundaries between heaven and earth were unusually thin. A compelling parallel emerges when comparing these beliefs to traditions from Mesoamerica. In Maya and Aztec cosmology, mountaintops, pyramids, and elevated temples served as points of connection between the human world and celestial realms. Beings described as gods often descended on high places or luminous platforms. While the Greek and Mesoamerican narratives developed independently, the structural similarity suggests that ancient cultures worldwide associated elevated, engineered spaces with divine contact. Scientific explanations emphasize that high places naturally inspire myth. Mountains offer isolation, dramatic landscapes, and visibility of celestial events. Yet the dragon houses differ from simple mythic associations because they involve architectural anomalies that lack clear functional purpose. The weight of the stones, the difficulty of access, and the precision of construction indicate that these buildings held significance beyond ordinary religious practice. The question remains, why would ancient builders construct such heavy, complex structures in places so difficult to reach? The absence of utilitarian indicators suggests that the motivation was symbolic or ceremonial, but symbolic of what the broader Indo-European tradition includes references to sky gods descending to mountains or appearing through storms. These stories often incorporate imagery of brightness, fire, or serpentine forms. While symbolic, the imagery occasionally resembles descriptions found in cultures far removed geographically. Some researchers argue that myths of descent can reflect ancient interpretations of natural celestial events, such as meteors or lightning strikes. Yet when these narratives coincide with highly unusual structures positioned deliberately at elevated sites, the line between symbolic interpretation and experiential memory becomes less clear. To add complexity, the dragon houses share engineering similarities with megalithic structures found in regions such as Corsica, Sardinia, and the Levant. Although these resemblances do not imply direct cultural connection, they indicate that certain building techniques were shared or rediscovered across wide distances. The broader pattern raises questions about whether knowledge of these techniques spread through contact or arose independently in multiple regions. The scientific community acknowledges that the dragon houses occupy a challenging spot in Greek archaeology. Their age is uncertain, their purpose ambiguous, and their cultural attribution unresolved. Some theories suggest they were the work of a local group with lost traditions. Others propose a connection to early ritual networks in the Aegean. Yet none fully address why these structures required such monumental effort when simpler alternatives would have sufficed. From a comparative perspective, the dragon houses serve as a reminder that the idea of divine descent was not confined to one region. Cultures across the world built elevated structures, carved monumental chambers, or aligned their architecture to the sky, often describing them as sites of contact between gods and humans. Whether interpreted as symbolic geography or recollections of extraordinary experiences, these constructions reflect a consistent human inclination to seek the divine at the threshold between earth and sky. In the end, the dragon houses stand as enigmatic markers of a forgotten purpose. They may represent sacred places where rituals were held, observatories for tracking celestial motion, or symbolic gateways to higher realms. Yet they also echo the pattern found throughout ancient civilizations. A belief that certain locations, often elevated and architecturally distinct, served as points of descent for beings associated with the heavens. Whether their builders intended to welcome gods, honor them, or merely replicate a memory passed down from earlier generations, the structures continue to defy full explanation. Like Teotihuacan's hidden tunnels or the Maya's light serpent, the dragon houses hint at a worldview in which the sky was not distant but accessible, and where the descent of powerful beings was not mythic imagination but part of the landscape's sacred history. As the archaeological and mythological record expands across continents, a striking pattern becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. Civilizations separated by vast distances with no confirmed contact preserve narratives that contain core similarities. Beings descending from the sky, bringing knowledge, transforming societies, and departing with the promise of return. In Mesoamerica, this figure is embodied in the feathered serpent. In the Mediterranean world, it appears in the descent of sky gods. In Mesopotamia, it takes the form of deities arriving from the heavens to instruct humanity. In the Andes, stories of radiant teachers echo the same motif. These parallels raise questions not easily answered within the boundaries of conventional cultural development. From a scientific perspective, scholars often attribute such similarities to convergent mythology. According to this view, different societies independently developed similar themes to explain natural phenomena or articulate spiritual beliefs. Thunderstorms, meteors, and astronomical events could all inspire stories of divine descent. While this explanation accounts for some broad thematic overlaps, it fails to address the extraordinary specificity found in many of these narratives. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent is explicitly tied to astronomical knowledge, calendar systems, and architectural alignments. These attributes are not typical of deities invented solely to explain natural forces. Rather, they suggest an association with advanced understanding. Similarly, in Mesopotamian texts, the Anunnaki are described not only as gods, but as bearers of agricultural, architectural, and mathematical knowledge. In ancient Egypt, Thoth is portrayed as a divine scribe responsible for science and measurement. Across these cultures, the celestial visitor is not merely a supernatural figure, but a teacher. The recurrence of this teacher motif challenges purely symbolic interpretation. If myth were simply a reflection of psychological archetypes, we would expect variation in the roles of sky beings across different societies. Instead, the same combination appears repeatedly: descent, instruction, transformation, departure, and an eventual return timed according to cosmic cycles. Another dimension of the pattern lies in the architectural record. Cultures with no historical connection built monumental structures aligned to celestial bodies with precision that exceeds what is expected from societies lacking advanced instruments. The pyramids of Giza align with Orion. The pyramids of Teotihuacan align with the Pleiades and solar cycles. The temple complexes of Angkor correspond to the constellation Draco. Stone structures in Britain and the Near East track solstices and lunar standstills. While these alignments can be explained by independent astronomical interest, their planetary scale suggests a shared emphasis on specific stars and cycles. Scholars acknowledge the global presence of megalithic architecture, but typically attribute its similarities to parallel human development. However, certain alignments correspond not merely to prominent celestial bodies, but to events or configurations rare enough to require long-term recording. This raises the question of how distant societies with limited contact developed such comparable astronomical precision. The Maya and Aztec took this idea further by associating the return of their celestial teachers with specific points in the sky. The Maya tied Kukulcans returned to celestial alignments at the end of cosmic cycles. The Aztec believed that Quetzalcoatl would return from the east under conditions mirrored in past events. These beliefs share structural similarities with traditions from Egypt, where the heliacal rising of Sirius marked the return of divine influence, or from Mesopotamia, where gods were said to revisit the earth according to the movement of certain stars. While mainstream archaeology classifies these ideas as mythic cosmology, they collectively paint a picture of cultures viewing the sky not only as a realm of gods, but as a schedule of return. Such a conception implies that the appearance or reappearance of celestial beings was anticipated, regulated by astronomical timing rather than random visitation or divine whim. This challenges the conventional interpretation of myth as purely symbolic. What makes the pattern more compelling is that many of these stories describe the visitors as physical beings, not spiritual apparitions. They eat, teach, travel, and depart. They are remembered as individuals who walked among early peoples. Over time, their memory becomes mythologized, but the core narrative remains consistent. Contact occurred, ended, and was expected to resume. From a historical standpoint, it is possible that these accounts reflect early encounters with unknown groups later idealized as gods. However, this explanation becomes strained when considering the astronomical knowledge associated with these visitors. The sophistication of the Maya calendar, the alignment of Teotihuacan, the astronomical symbolism of Egyptian temples, and the cosmological calculations of Mesopotamia all suggest influence beyond typical cultural exchange. Another scientific angle examines the transmission of knowledge. If these civilizations inherited astronomical frameworks from older cultures, the origin of that knowledge remains unidentified. Some researchers propose the existence of a pre-flood or early post-glacial society with advanced understanding. While this theory remains speculative, It attempts to reconcile the abrupt appearance of complex knowledge in multiple regions. The pattern of descent, teaching, and return persists across cultures because it is encoded not only in myth but in architecture, calendars, and ritual systems. For the Maya and Aztec, the belief in the return of the feathered serpent was not peripheral. It shaped political decisions, guided temple orientation, and influenced the timing of major ceremonies. Their world was built on the expectation of recurrence. The broader question is not simply whether such beings existed, but why so many civilizations insisted that their return would coincide with astronomical cycles. This consistency suggests that ancient peoples believed the movements of the sky could predict or govern the reappearance of forces that once walked the earth. Whether interpreted as shared mythology, inherited knowledge, or a collective memory of extraordinary encounters, the global pattern remains one of the most enduring mysteries in the study of ancient civilizations. And if the Maya were correct that celestial cycles determine the timing of return, then understanding these patterns may be the key to deciphering the next chapter in the story of the feathered gods. For centuries, the rainforests of Mesoamerica concealed the true extent of the ancient world beneath their dense canopy. Explorers who ventured into the jungle found isolated temples and fragmented ruins, often assuming these were isolated ceremonial centers. The scale of Maya civilization remained misunderstood, not because the evidence was gone, but because it was invisible. Only recently has technology allowed researchers to see through the forest and reveal what lay hidden beneath. LiDAR scanning revolutionized the field. By stripping away vegetation in digital form, LiDAR exposes the contours of buried cities, revealing straight lines, road networks, and architectural grids across vast regions. What emerged from the first surveys challenged long-standing assumptions. The Maya did not live in scattered ceremonial hubs, but in densely connected urban systems, with highways stretching for kilometers, reservoirs engineered with precision, and residential districts arranged with intentional planning. The most startling discoveries came from the Piton region of Guatemala. LiDAR revealed not a cluster of towns, but an entire urban landscape, sprawling across thousands of square kilometers. Some newly uncovered sites contain monumental architecture rivaling well-known centers like Tikal or Calakmul. These structures were not isolated. They were linked by elevated causeways, forming a network that suggests unified planning or shared cosmological principles. Mainstream archaeology acknowledges the significance of these findings, interpreting them as evidence of a more complex and interconnected Maya civilization than previously assumed. This perspective emphasizes that human population density and engineering capacity were higher than earlier models suggested. Yet certain aspects of the LiDAR maps raise questions that go beyond urban development. A number of newly discovered structures appear positioned along alignments consistent with celestial events. Some follow the path of solar zeniths, others correspond to lunar standstill points or the rising positions of notable stars. While astronomy influenced many Maya cities, the consistency of these alignments across distant sites suggests coordinated planning on a much larger scale. The degree of orientation similarity is unusual. It is one thing for a city to align with celestial events. It is another for dozens of cities to reflect nearly identical astronomical patterns, despite differences in geography and terrain. Some scholars propose that shared religious beliefs drove this consistency. According to this view, temple builders followed common cosmological guidelines that shaped architectural orientation. While this is plausible, the precision of alignment across remote regions is difficult to attribute solely to symbolic preference. In several cases, structures are oriented within a margin of error so narrow that modern survey tools are required to measure the deviation. Such uniformity implies not only shared belief, but shared method. Another enigmatic aspect of the LiDAR discoveries is the presence of isolated structures standing far from major population centres. These buildings, often perched on elevated terrain, lack the surrounding infrastructure typical of residential or commercial zones. They resemble platforms, truncated pyramids, or towers with clear sightlines to the horizon. Their placement suggests they served observational or signalling purposes rather than domestic functions. From a scientific standpoint, these could represent lookout points, markers for boundaries, or places for ritual. Yet in several cases, their orientation aligns with astronomical events rather than terrestrial landmarks. Some researchers have speculated that they functioned as nodes in a large regional network designed to track celestial cycles. If so, this raises the question of why such coordination would extend across hundreds of kilometers. Underground features add another layer to the mystery. At several sites identified through LiDAR, tunnels and chambers have been found beneath primary structures. Some resemble artificial caves, with smooth walls and symmetrical shapes. Others contain mineral coatings that reflect faint light, similar to the pyrite-lined tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent in Teotihuacan. These subterranean features suggest a ritual or symbolic purpose, yet their recurrence across distant locations indicates shared cultural knowledge or inherited tradition. One hypothesis within archaeology is that these caves served as portals to the underworld, a concept central to Maya cosmology. Caves symbolized entrances to other realms, places where gods or ancestors could be contacted. This interpretation explains the symbolic function, but not the engineering consistency observed across disparate regions. A more speculative perspective proposes that the Maya may have sought to replicate environments or spaces associated with celestial events or divine encounters described in their myths. If these structures were intended to serve as symbolic models of the cosmos, their subterranean components could represent an attempt to bridge earthly architecture with celestial phenomena. What makes these discoveries particularly compelling is the coherence of the network revealed by LiDAR. Cities that had been assumed to be independent centers now appear as nodes in a larger system. Their alignments, architectural choices, and underground chambers form patterns difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The possibility emerges that the Maya were following a blueprint, whether inherited from earlier cultures or derived from their own interpretations of cosmic cycles. The scientific community recognizes that these findings demand a re-evaluation of Maya civilization, yet debate continues regarding their significance. Some researchers advocate for a reinterpretation of Maya social organization, suggesting greater centralization or coordination. Others maintain that symbolic and ritual factors provide sufficient explanation. Still, the persistence of precise astronomical alignment across both monumental and isolated structures implies that the Maya were not simply building cities, but creating a landscape encoded with cosmological meaning. This raises an unresolved question. If these alignments were intended to track celestial cycles or anticipate cosmic events, what were the Maya preparing for? Why invest such immense labor in aligning cities, tunnels, and towers to the movements of the sky unless those movements held deeper implications for their world? The LiDAR discoveries have not closed the mysteries of the Maya. They have amplified them. The jungle, once an obstacle, now reveals a hidden network of knowledge that hints at a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos woven directly into the architecture of an entire civilization. And beneath the roots of the forest, structures continue to emerge, suggesting that the blueprint behind Maya society may extend further than we ever realized. The question is no longer whether a hidden system existed, but what purpose it served, and whether the Maya believed that within the alignment of stars and stone lay the key to the gate they expected to open again. As the sun sets over the ruins of Mesoamerica, long shadows stretch across plazas that once echoed with ceremony. The pyramids stand silent, yet their presence still carries an intensity that feels deliberate, as if their builders expected someone to return and read the message carved into stone. Through centuries of abandonment and rediscovery, one pattern persists. The ancient world constructed its greatest monuments not for the time in which they were built, but for a time that was still to come. Across Maya and Aztec cultures, the belief in cyclical time shaped everything from architecture to ritual life. They saw history not as a linear sequence but as a repeating procession of eras. Each age ended in transformation, followed by renewal, and each renewal was marked by celestial events that could be predicted with astonishing accuracy. Their calendars were not static records. They were instruments designed to anticipate the next turning of the cosmic wheel. Archaeology explains these beliefs as mythic responses to environmental patterns or political needs. Yet the consistency with which these cycles align with measurable astronomical events raises questions that conventional theory does not fully settle. The Maya long count ends at a moment tied to a rare galactic alignment. The equinox serpent descends with perfect precision. Temples orient themselves towards cycles that unfold across centuries. These features could be symbolic, but their precision suggests deliberate intent. The recurrent appearance of sky-based teachers in global traditions adds another layer to this puzzle. Civilizations far beyond Mesoamerica described beings who arrived during specific celestial configurations, imparted knowledge, and departed with a promise tied to astronomical timing. Whether interpreted as metaphors, cultural memory, or isolated encounters, the structural similarities between these narratives remain striking. They speak of cycles, returns, and a relationship between the sky and human history that ancient peoples treated with utmost seriousness. As LiDAR continues to reveal hidden Maya cities and tunnels under Teotihuacan reflect starlight in engineered darkness, the scientific landscape shifts. These findings demonstrate that ancient societies possessed an intellectual depth we are only beginning to understand. Their architecture encodes mathematics, astronomy, and cosmology in ways that challenge assumptions about technological development. Some explanations attribute this to cumulative observation, inherited tradition, or shared ritual practice. Yet unresolved anomalies persist. Why do so many structures across vast distances share the same celestial blueprint? Why do complex ideas appear fully formed rather than developing gradually? Why does the cosmological knowledge of these civilizations exceed what is expected from their material culture? The answers remain incomplete, and perhaps that is the most significant discovery of all. For the Maya and the Aztec, the sky was not remote. It was active, it was cyclical, it held the memory of creation and the promise of return. They built their world around the expectation that moments of alignment would open pathways between realms. These pathways were not metaphorical, they were events inscribed into calendars, reenacted through architecture, and preserved in myth. If the beliefs of these ancient cultures reflect symbolic interpretations of natural processes, their meaning lies in the human desire to connect with forces beyond earthly life. If the beliefs preserve memories of actual encounters with advanced visitors, then their monuments serve as records waiting for rediscovery. If the truth lies somewhere between the two, blending observation with inherited knowledge, then we are only beginning to understand the complexity of ancient worldviews. In any case, the ancient message remains the same. The cycles continue, the alignments return, and the gate, whatever form it once took, is not closed forever. The Maya carved their vision of the cosmos into stone so that a future age, long after their cities were overgrown by jungle, would see what they saw. The Aztec preserved stories of descent so that later generations would remember that the sky once opened. The builders of distant structures in Greece and the Near East left clues embedded in mountains and megaliths. Together, these fragments form a global pattern that suggests humanity once viewed the heavens not as distant stars, but as part of its own past. As archaeology uncovers new evidence and science advances our understanding of ancient cultures, one reality becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The The past is larger than our current models allow. The ancient world was connected to the sky in ways that modern interpretation only partially explains. And if the calendar cycles that guided Maya and Aztec civilization continue as they once did, then the events they anticipated may not lie behind us, but ahead. Before we reach the end of this story, take a moment to support the journey. A like or a share helps these hidden histories travel farther, and subscribing ensures you never miss the next chapter we uncover together. Let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from. Your presence here keeps this exploration alive. The gate of the gods opened once. The ancient world believed it would open again. And the more we uncover beneath the jungle and beyond the stars, the more we begin to understand why.